Digital. The foundling's extra toe seemed insignificant, a skin tag with a crust of nail. No other oddness, but she rarely smiled, and only then as if at dreams that pleased. Mechanical things delighted her. Her fingers smelled of metal. Slung in the branches of an apple tree, she juggled a socket set, turned the handle of a rotary whisk, dismembered clocks. At school she made neither enemies nor friends, though toes were a whispering point in the gym. Noted for alacrity, she scaled the wall bars to hang upside down, alone with her visions. She became an inventor, worked in her own world, created a self-cleaning sandwich toaster, flexible scaffolding, long-handled toenail clippers. Lovers were few, respected her musings. Her child was born on a couch in her workshop, delivered by hand. His sixth toe, lassoed with a platinum thread, removed without fuss before he could utter a cry. I'm going to read 4 poems from my distant past, and my past is very distant. The first is called German Lessons. There were words that made us snigger, Fuchs and Vater. Verbs went to the ends of sentences, however far away. We waited and waited, then plonked down a verloren. Our teacher had no fingernails. We didn't know why, nor why she sighed like a closing door. She was never angry, never raised her voice, but we could tell she didn't find Vater funny. Whenever I hear the word traurig, I smell her satin blouse. That was Miss Treacher, my German teacher, who was a wonderful woman. This is about another German. This is called Miriam. She was brought in by the caretaker after the prayers and hymns. He held her arm as if she was his prisoner. She didn't do German with us, but we heard her whisper with Fräulein in quick-fire German, saw that Fräulein held her hand. We wondered if we should tell. Someone said there might be a secret number like Fräulein's on Miriam's arm, but when we searched her, there wasn't one, not on any part of her body. She didn't cry when we stripped her, didn't say anything. Her underwear was just like ours, bought by our mothers from her dad's shop in the covered market. A group of us went to look. Miriam was behind the counter. She smiled at us, introduced us to her father as her friends, though we were only there to try and see her father's wrist. Sorry, these are a bit gloomy. I didn't realize until I started reading. This is Thelma, another outsider, but a rather different one. Thelma came to our school in the middle of the year with a bag of sweets, the biggest any of us had ever seen. The whole class crowded round her. She was twice the size of the other girls, brown and muscular, her frizzy hair a wild mane that tossed and whinnied in the playground. She talked about dogs and horses and caravans, laughed when we asked if she lived by the sea. She was 10 like us, but she couldn't read or write. The sweets didn't make up for that. We left her to play on her own. Thelma stood by the railings, holding on, looking out, looking for a way out. Oh, this is more cheerful. This is about my Uncle Tony. Mother said he was a sex maniac. She'd heard the bed springs when we stayed with them in Scarborough. I don't remember Uncle Tony, only custard tarts and my cousin showing me how to knit. Then his photo was in the news of the world. Pills and whiskey in a double bed with a woman who had rabbit teeth and wasn't Auntie Joan. Suicide was a crime in the 50s. They prosecuted the ones who failed. Uncle Tony and the rabbit got 6 weeks in Durham. They married afterwards. He was a black sheep now. I never saw him again. I wondered if she was as pretty as Auntie Joan, who never had a headache, never took so much as an aspirin. Knitting creeps into much of what I write because I like knitting. It has a wonderfully poetic vocabulary, but I read this poem to a pub full of men in Bradford the other night, and it didn't go down very well. They hadn't a clue, but I'll try again. With Fly. In 1987, on the Isle of Wight, I bought 6 ounces of cashmere yarn from a woman who had knitted a suit for her husband. "Come out, dear," she trilled into the back room. He was a dandy in dark chocolate. The jacket had herringbone stitch lapels, whipped buttonholes, and pockets with flaps. The trousers a zipped fly. I wondered if he only wore it in the shop, or if he went to the working men's club carrying his bowls in a knitting bag, to a church where the vicar's surplice was a veil stitch in 3-ply baby wool, if she had a twisted rib shroud on the go, widow's weeds worked on 8s and 10s, a headstone on order from the monumental mason, plain with a moss-stitch border. This is called protanopia, which is a posh word for colourblindness. It was inspired by my husband, who wouldn't even notice that he was colourblind if I didn't keep banging on about it. Protanopia. Red and green are one to you. At traffic lights, it's glow for green. A holly tree's berries are unripe grapes, its leaves as red as fire engines, or, to tell the truth, both are monochrome, a muddy mediocre. Sartorial indiscretions are the only clue to your deficiency. You do not aim for flight, where port and starboard differentiate forwards from back, pursuit from a head-on crash. Not knowing ruby from emerald, your loss is only mine, wishing as I do that you could see the jewels that pull fieldfare and thrush to the mountain ash, distinguish Liverpool from Plymouth Argyle, play a successful game of Ludo. Green and red are all the same to you, a blush the green of nausea, envy like anger's rubefaction. You harmonize, adopt a neutral tone. I've written a lot of poems about the suffragettes, too many probably, so I will only read one. It's a sort of before and after women got the vote. Tedium versus liberation. Needlewomen. At home in father's drawing room, I was best at drawn thread work, couldn't get the knack of French knots. We sewed each day from 3 to 5, a buzz, a hum, waited for a proposal, a legacy, knew that some of us would grow old nursing parents. Sometimes there was reckless talk, bicycles, cropped hair, freedom. In the Holloway workroom, words were not allowed. We made shirts for prisoners from cloth so coarse our fingers bled. Once we sang, all of us together, and were sent back to our cells. Work was better. Friendship signalled with eyes, lips, sighs. Notes slipped inside cotton reels. And trained for nothing better, we stitched votes for women round every hem. In the First World War, air raids were a cause of huge panic to people who only expected to see birds or clouds in the sky. Zeppelin, Hull, 1915. It hovers above our heads, pendant in a sky rarely troubled by foreign bodies. People rush from their houses, pile a lifetime's stuff on top of babies in prams, wheel their tottering wealth of caged birds, framed pictures, figured vases, seashells, clothing, bedding, to parks and open spaces. Sleep in crowds in the utter dark imposed by the lighting order, nobody daring to strike a match, to count their children. Trusting motherly neighbours, and the policewomen come from London to keep all safe. At dawn, with the airship gone, they count their losses. Pilfered spoons, teapots, scraps of lace, a peacock feather fan, one baby suffocated. Sword swallower. Thought he'd work up to it, started with a penknife, the sort that folds into a gobbet the size of a cocktail sausage. It slipped down nicely with a coating of lard. Graduated to table knives, got a taste for cutlery. Forks were fine if he left the tines till last, snacked on teaspoons straight from the kitchen drawer. Stainless steel soon lost its shine. He wanted richer metal, combed second-hand markets for silverware, found giant serving spoons engraved with coats of arms, ivory-handled cutlery sets nested in slots in velvet-lined boxes, rusty oyster knives, throwing knives, scalpels, craft knives, shivs, ornamental daggers, an Anglo-Saxon sea axe. Then he saw his sword, a rapier with a basket guard, tasselled pommel, bronze hilt chased with dragons and birds. Drawn from its scabbard, the blade flashed mouth-watering sunbeams. He slathered it with butter, threw back his head and plunged the point into his racked raw throat. The final item, pride of his collection, his coup de grace. And finally, this is dedicated to my friend Kate, nurse and animal stuffer. It's called A Lucky Find. The hair was all ears, black-edged horse chestnut leaves erect on the tarmac above a stove-in skull and a sequel of fluff and guts. Beyond the ministrations of the taxidermist, who still wore her uniform and upside-down watch, a stethoscope slithering from her pocket as she drove home from her shift in A&E. But later she came upon a badger, so whole it seemed to be sleeping off an excess of worms and slugs at the side of the road. This one will do for the freezer, she thought, as she bent over it, unaware of the stopped motorist who crept up on her and said he thought she was probably too late. Thank you.